Hello and welcome to Animal Watch, and today we are talking dog fights and dog bites.
Ow.
Yeah, now flex it.
I can't really very well. It does hurt a lot.
Okay, now rotate it back again. Flex it.
I can't. That hurts.
Hello everybody, unfortunately I missed an episode of Animal Watch last week as I ended up in hospital because I had to break up a huge fight with two of my big dogs, my female Czechoslovakian wolfdog here, Kumi, and my rottweiler mix, Zora, from Romania. And as you can see, I didn't come off very well. Well, I ended up in accident and emergency with 10 very deep bites to my hand and my wrist because I did the thing that all the experts advise us not to do, which is to dive in where all the action is. But the thing is, I love my dogs very, very much, and I really, really don't want them to get hurt. So I wasn't thinking, and I can imagine that a lot of you out there would have probably done the same. I mean, we've got Kumi here. She's an incredibly powerful Czechoslovakian wolfdog. They're used in man training to bring down humans. Their bite force is incredibly hard, and she does go for the throat, whereas Zora, my Romanian stray, she's part Rottweiler, part German Shepherd, again breeds that are used in police and man training, and she is formidable and she bites like crazy. So when you have two alpha females like that, they mean business. You can't just leave them to get on with it because you will end up with a dead dog or even possibly two dead dogs. Sadly, both my females cannot live together, and they have not lived together for over 5 to 6 years, but because of an error last weekend, both dogs ended up in the same room. Now, this never ever happens, but it did happen last week. Now, sometimes fights can be resolved, but very, very occasionally in alpha dog breeds, when the dogs are the same age, I mean, Kumi here is 6, Zora is 5, they've got the same mentality, same pack status, and they absolutely hate one another. And when you get females that really hate one another and they have a grudge, unfortunately, the only thing you can do is to separate them for life. This is my little trip to hospital after the dog fight.
I was rushed to A&E, and the first thing they did was to examine my hand. They then washed it with saline solution and gave me intravenous antibiotics, as they told me that even a single bite can cause a deep infection, which can lead on to blood poisoning and flesh-eating diseases. I was also given a tetanus shot. Finally, I was told that I should have an operation to clean out the wounds, but that was up to me if I did that. As there was no space to do it that day, I chose to go home stacked up with antibiotics and take my chances. I also sustained quite a lot of leg and body injuries that I didn't notice at first as my hand was so painful. Lots of scratches and bruising on my legs and a few small bites. Now, Kumi and Zora managed to put a few puncture marks in each other, and that's why they're wearing the collars of shame, pretty much just to stop them licking the scabs. Now, their injuries could have been far, far worse, but as I intervened, I think my hand took the brunt of what Zora would have done to Kumi and vice versa, meaning they ended up just biting each other on the extremities like their legs. They too have been on a course of antibiotics, and most vets will suggest that none of the wounds are stitched, but kept clean and allowed to naturally scab over. Of course, if your dog sustains much more serious injuries, you must take them straight to the vet. Both my dogs were taken straight to the vet anyway for checkups to make sure the injuries were normal and not more serious. The week after the fight was difficult as my hand ballooned over the first 3 days and I couldn't use it at all. I lay on my sofa sleeping a lot, taking painkillers and feeling pretty helpless, not being able to use my left hand at all. I visited the doctor on the Tuesday and he re-examined the bites and told me I was lucky and had got away with infection, which can affect up to 50% of people. So I was truly blessed. Okay, so it's I got the dog bites last Sunday and today is Saturday, so we are about 6 days later, and I'm just going to change the dressing now, see what it looks like. Ow, ow, ow. It's a lot better than it was, because last week I couldn't use this hand at all. This was swollen like a golf ball, but you can see now that it's the same size. So the swelling has gone right down. These are some plasters I put on myself, and I'm just gonna take these off, and you can see with me. Ooh, ow, ow. Hairs. What it looks now. Ouchie, ouchie, ouchie. Ugh. That's a bit gross. Right. Ow! It's stuck in my hair. Oh, I think I'm peeling a scab off. That really doesn't help. Very, very pleased with that. I think the idea now is to try and get a little bit more air. That is still, as you can see, I'm sorry, pretty pussy, and that's even after several days. Let's have a look under there. Oh, that one's quite pussy, but it's scabbing over, which is nice. This was the worst one here on the wrist. This one here, which actually doesn't look that bad because it hasn't got a scab on it, but that's because it doesn't want to heal. It's sort of just oozing and scabbing. So, well, not scabbing rather, like I just said. What I'm going to do now is I've got some TCP, and the idea is just to keep everything really clean. And of course these other areas here getting some really good scabs on, so I'm really pleased about that now, because that means I got away with the infection, which apparently can affect up to 50% of people with dog bites. Can you believe it? 50% can end up with a serious deep tissue infection. Some of my dog and wolf friends have said that I've probably got away with it because I built up my own degree of antibodies from over the years from living with these animals, which I don't know whether it's true or not. Doctors would probably argue against that, but you know what? You never know. It could be true, but that's looking a lot better than it did last week. And it's just keeping it clean, and there we go. Just stick that on. Feels nice. Less itchy.
Well, it's a week later and luckily the swelling has gone down, as you can see there. Stay there, Kumi. I'll just show you very, very briefly. It's a lot better, but I thought in the circumstances that we could really benefit with an episode of Animal Watch which talks about dog fights and talks about dog bites and talks about generally what we would do if we were all caught in the same situation, and go through a few methods of what some of the experts suggest to us are good ways of resolving dog fights. Okay, first of all, how can we tell the difference between dog play fighting and full-on dog fighting?
Most dogs play fight as puppies in a way to learn how to rank one another and defend themselves. If this was wolves or wild dogs, this would be essential to survival and an important lesson in life. With dogs, there is still an instinct to do this. But as dogs grow and they sexually mature, the play fighting can start to have undertones of more intense and important body language that some humans can miss. For example, a dog that postures above another dog is showing dominance. Also, a lifted tail signals dominance. Paws on the back is another test of dominance. All of these signals are testing the other dog to see how far it can be pushed and whether it has the oats to challenge or submit. A fixed, unwavering stare is a cue to keep the dogs apart if the head is dropped low and there is snarling. One of the final signs you will see in a dog who is on the threshold of reacting is called the whale eye. The dog will turn his head away from the perceived threat while keeping an eye on it, exposing the whites of his eyes. At that point, things are going to escalate and you should remove yourself or the other dog from the situation promptly. Dominance testing is profound in the same sex, as both sexes are in competition for a mate. This is why neutering and spaying your dogs will help to dampen down same-sex aggression.
So when does play and testing become a proper fight? And when does it cross the boundary to the point that it can be life-threatening for your dogs?
First, let's look at play fighting. You can see how relaxed the dogs are here. They use their mouths and win points with scoring, but their bodies are floppy and relaxed. The dogs look happy. Now let's look at a snappy dog fight. It is bad, but you can see that there is a lack of full-on contact and grasping. These fights are easier to separate and often only sustain small injuries due to the dogs doing more shouting than full-on contact. Now last, this is a far more serious dog fight where you can see that the dogs mean business. They are more silent and sustain their bites and shaking rather than simply snapping. This public street fight is a good example of one of the worst you can get. And despite the public using mace spray and even a taser, the top brown dog was unrelenting, and only after a long time were the pair separated. This shows that any one fight is not the same and can dramatically differ in dynamics.
And despite all the experts saying to you there is a set way of breaking up a fight, of course we know this is not true because there are different circumstances, there are different dogs. Dogs come in all shapes and sizes, from tiny little chihuahuas up to great big Caucasian shepherds. We've got this one here that's got a massive bite force. She could be fighting an incredibly tiny dog. She could be fighting a dog that is equally matched to her. The dogs could belong to different owners. The dogs could be different ages. One could be old, one could be young. They could be same-sex fights. They could be defending their owner. And also fights can happen in different situations. They can happen in your home, they can happen in a public area. And people that own the dogs could be young children, they could be strong adults, or they could be the elderly and infirm. Now, all of these circumstances will make that fight differ. So there are ways of dealing with it. But at that time that it actually happens to you, you have to go on your own instinct and what is best for you, the dog, and the circumstances at the time. Right, so I'm going to go through a few options of what the experts are suggesting are good ways to break up a fight. Now remember, if you are a child or you are elderly, I would definitely not dive in if you see a dog fight. I would seek help from an adult or somebody else rather than going in and seriously injuring yourself.
Number 1. If the fight is not serious and has not escalated into the clinging on silent fight, then you can try banging large objects together or using a whistle or an air horn. Number 2, you can try to separate them with a barrier. This is easier said than done. If you are on your own and the dogs are large, this is going to be hard. But if the dogs are small, this could be an option. Number 3, the wheelbarrow. This can only be done with 2 people, as you need 1 person per dog's legs. You need to elevate the legs above their head in order to try to get the dogs to lose balance and detach from one another. Do not tear them apart until they let go, or you will damage them. Once the dogs are apart, get them as far away from each other as possible. Number 4, the lasso method. This sounds easier than it's done, but is an option if you are on your own and you have 2 fighting dogs and no one around to help you. You need to take a lead and slip the leash around the belly of one dog and then thread the leash through the handle part, creating a noose around the lower abdomen of the dog that will pull tight. You can then attempt to pull the dog backwards and anchor them off onto a movable object. Once this is done, you need to tackle dog number 2, who is most probably trying to attack the first dog that you have tied up. You can try the same lasso method or simply wheelbarrow him or her backwards and out of the room or area. Number 5. The finger up the bottom technique. Yes, you heard me right. Apparently, according to online sources, a finger up the bottom of a dog will cause the dog to detach from his opponent. I have not tried this method and would be interested to find out if this works. So contact me if you have done this and let me know. Number 6, a spray to the face with a defense dog spray. There are professional online shops that sell sprays you can carry in case of an emergency, which when sprayed at the nose and eye area of fighting dogs is supposed to cause them to let go of their opponent. One example is this spray, Bite Back, which I was recommended after my fight by a police dog trainer. Number 7, the hose pipe. Fine if dogs are fighting next to a hose pipe, but 9 times out of 10 they aren't going to be. Some people suggest that water over the head will stop a fight, but I've seen some pretty bad fights and water just isn't going to stop the dogs from killing each other. A power hose, on the other hand, could help detach them, but remember that they can be dangerous and you could possibly hurt one of the dogs in the process. Number 8. Let them fight. Not the nicest of options, but if you are a child or an elderly person and simply cannot step in and there is no one to help you, you will have to think of yourself. Do not scream madly at the dogs. They can take this as a rallying call and it can have the opposite effect in inspiring them to fight harder. Do not try to grab the face area. The dog can redirect their aggression onto you in their red mist phase and you could get badly bitten. Never pull on their tails. You can break the delicate nerves in the tail, resulting in incontinence and other injuries.
Now remember, if you ever find yourself in the position of having to break up a dog fight, remember there is no right or wrong way of doing it. You'll just have to listen to some of my advice and perhaps pick up a few things like a dog spray and things like that, and just make sure that you address the situation safely at all times. If you enjoyed this episode of Animal Watch, please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, where I will be bringing you weekly episodes on dogs, wolf dogs, wolves, animal rescue and conservation. Bye for now.